Irvine. And standing by to join me is award-winning director Melissa Haizlip. And we're going to talk about her critically acclaimed film, Mr. Soul, which I loved. And it's launched on HBO Max August 1st. And it celebrates the amazing life of Ellis. This is your uncle, correct?
Yes, Ellis Haizlip was my uncle, and he was such a wonderful person and a pioneer in broadcast history and everything. But he was also my favorite human, my first babysitter. So of course, there's this real connection there. He was also a mentor to me in the arts and really encouraged me to go into the arts, even though my parents were, educators and in the media and
Sure.
wanted me to be a doctor, lawyer, or educator. And I was like, actually,
because of my uncle
over here, because he's got some tickets to, Broadway. So I'll be
exactly. Exactly. Now, did you actually watch the show as a kid? Were you watching the show?
No, I was actually super young. I think I was 3 when it first came on, 3 or 4.
Yes.
But one thing that was special was that Ellis Haizlip lived with us. We were on the Upper West Side in Manhattan.
Okay.
And even though he had his own apartment down in Chelsea on Fifth Avenue, he decided he wanted to be with us. And so he came very close to us, but he would bring over after the tapings what I thought were just some really magical friends. It turns out they were the artists who had appeared on the show, and he would hold court. They would have, oatmeal and strawberries at midnight. And I just knew there was something magical happening. But as a child, I didn't really understand. I just could feel the energy. And it would be years later before I realized I was bouncing on James Earl Jones's knee, or it was Melba Moore and Clifton Davis, or the children of Malcolm X. Because
amazing.
After Malcolm X was assassinated, Ellis was very close with Betty Shabazz, his widow, and she was afraid to go out because of the climate in the country, and nobody was protecting her, the Nation of Islam and everything. But Ellis was a good friend with her and with Malcolm, and so he would invite the children over to play with me, so that he could hang out with Betty Shabazz and make sure she was okay. Again, no clue. And this is not a flex in any way. I'm not flexing. This is just what my childhood was like. I'm still friends to this day with Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz's daughters. Beautiful. And there's a tribute to Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz in the film by way of what they were doing in the Black Arts movement. But it was important to get it right because they were also family friends.
I want to tell people who are not familiar with the show, it was the first national Black variety show on TV from 68 to 73, and it was titled Soul.
I like to say it's the greatest show you've never heard of, because it's like, we think of especially for Black folks or people of color, we think of our cultural history, in media and entertainment, starting with Soul Train. And it's important to say that this predated Soul Train by a couple of years, because it did start in 68. And because we were on the heels of the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, the country was in turmoil. There was no precedent for this kind of show. And also it's important to recognize what was happening in media. You basically had 3 television stations.
That's right.
ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then they created PBS as a system of, nationally connected shows that were funded ultimately by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was funded by the government. So you had this national television audience that was free, that was forming. And so Soul happened at the same time. And I think that really kind of imprinted upon this idea of creating a national audience, and in so doing, a national Black audience, which had never really happened before.
Well, it felt like they never had this platform to do, their art and be heard and be seen.
It was kind of amazing.
Amazing. The footage. Yeah. Well, what was it like going through this footage?
It was breathtaking. It was almost like an embarrassment of riches, because there's 130 hours.
Whoa.
Meaning 130 episodes of an hour long each, some of which have been lost, unfortunately. But the idea that it just kept unfolding like a gift, like, okay, what else is in here? Like, are you kidding me? And because we know who these artists are now, they're household names, from Earth, Wind and Fire, Al Green, Patti LaBelle,
Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder,
Yeah.
and then activists like, the Black Panthers, and poets like Nikki Giovanni, literary icons like James Baldwin. But the idea of actually seeing them in the beginning, it's just amazing. And it's so illuminating. It's like a time capsule, but it also is so revealing about the beginning of sort of this birth of freedom of expression and this desire to be more than what was perceived at the time, which was really negative about people of color, because that was what was happening, segregation and all the issues that our country was struggling with 50 years ago. We forget that sometimes, that how pervasive that was. This segregation of, there was basically, and the media was, well, really what they determined was there were two worlds, one Black and one white. And the media was largely responsible for this. And so the idea of sort of the media trying to like have a cultural reset was really significant. And in a way that feels like what's happening right now, 50 years later. We're all going, okay, hang on. We need to press the restart button. Right. After what happened last year, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, but also after COVID, we're all not after, because it's still happening, but this idea of really questioning who we are and how we can move forward as a country and include everybody,
I call it how we can learn how to become better humans.
Yes. Oh my goodness, the humanity. You're so right. And I was just talking with a friend this morning saying, what's going to happen 50 years from now when we look back on this time? We have like the Age of Enlightenment and all the art that brought. I feel like this is the age of accountability.
Oh, yes.
For everything, for our past ills, for erasure, sort of erasing the contributions of all the people in the country, whether they be quote unquote immigrants or people of color or, our Native Americans. Then there's an accountability with Me Too, and accountability of behavior and treating people better.
Definitely.
Woo, it's going to be a doozy in the history books.
I know. And, I feel that it really starts with rewriting our curriculum. That really has to start with the schools and what we teach kids, how we teach them, what's important. And I know people are up in arms about, what we're teaching, what we're not teaching. But
critical race theory, all of that. But it is about really just being accountable for the truth of who we are. Ironically, I think that will set us free when we recognize when there's no hierarchy. Of course, that's impossible because that's human nature. But
unfortunately,
it's really beautiful to have a film like this that kind of suggests that there's always been a beautiful contribution of people of color to the country. And whether it's music or the arts or even politics. And I think what Ellis Haizlip did with Soul was he created a vehicle, not just for African-American artistry, but it was a platform for freedom of expression and the fight for social justice.
Yes.
All of these things came together, like the intersectionality of all of these topics was really revolutionary in terms of television. Sure. So when you look at it, you're like, what?
Right. Look at the time period. Yeah.
The politics and it was so passionate and so pure. And I find that really endearing and uplifting. And I think we just wanted to share that with the world. And, it's a way to look back on how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. But it's also really entertaining.
It definitely is. But one thing I'm thinking too is you got to see a side of your uncle you didn't know because you were so young, and he was so unpretentious.
He was so sincere.
Yes.
And it's remarkable. And I have met a lot of the people that he knew over time. And luckily I grew up with him and stayed in his orbit and under his wing really until when he passed. And I recognized that there were so many famous people that he knew, but that wasn't the connection that they had. His idea was furthering the careers of artists and politicians and supporting this like striving to be better. He was kind of like an Afro-futurist in that he was looking to the future where things would definitely be better. But they loved him because of the relationship and the friendship that they had. And they valued that more than anything. And there's so much to learn from that in terms of the humanity of people helping each other and furthering each other's dreams. And you do see that in him because he was kind of a reluctant host, you know.
That's what I was going to say. Yes.
Really, I really wanted to show that kind of fish out of water.
Yes.
Vibe in the beginning, because it really does speak to him being an unsung hero, like, and you get to see that evolution as he gets bolder, more confident. Mm-hmm. The show gets more beautiful, the production value ramps up, the artists and the stars become more famous. So you really get to take that ride. And for people who don't know the show, it's such a discovery.
It's beautiful. You know, we had talked earlier how this was shown at Syracuse University.
Yes, indeed. Syracuse University is important to us because Robert Thompson is a wonderful, I believe he's a director. Well, tell me what his title is there. Do you recall?
I thought it was television studies. I might be wrong. Is it television studies? Okay.
Yes, and we wanted to have a television historian to guide us and to understand. You had to really understand the landscape of television and what was happening in the zeitgeist of the nation to really appreciate what Soul interrupted and why Soul was so different from what was on television. And so he really provided us with sort of an academic spine for the film and that history of media, and he's featured in the film. So Professor Thompson invited us to the Newhouse Center. Shout out to Syracuse University.
Go Archman. And you're wearing the color.
Orange color. I just need something blue. What do I? And so
I've got the blue.
Oh yeah. So together. Oh, you do. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I got the blue one.
So we were able to do a wonderful screening, and I hope to go back there. And it was just really inspiring to speak to these young students of journalism and television and have this wonderful event there, because we want to bridge that gap. You know, so often young folks, that nobody wants to look back because they think it's nostalgic or it's archival, but there's so much to learn and to see.
Yes.
That is really educational at the same time. But we wanted to bridge the gap. So it's not just an old movie, but it resonates today.
Yes.
And that's why we kind of ended it the way we did with, the legacy of Soul and who's upholding that legacy now.
I think it's really important to examine that show closely because of the place it had in history. And I feel like, I wish there was a panel at Syracuse. I'd love to pitch this, how to become better humans. Really?
Oh, that would be great.
Becoming better humans.
A whole chapter would be on the perception of culture and the perception of others, and
absolutely.
How we can impact that in media, especially because especially now, Janeane, when we have so many outlets and everybody is in their own silos because of the quarantine or because of the pandemic, and we are looking to media, whether it's social media, TikTok, Instagram, like all these places where we see ourselves.
Sure.
If we can impact that and if I were a hashtag, I would be, use your power for good. That would be my hashtag, because there's so many opportunities to uplift with positivity. And I just think we've been through so much trauma, that curating joy and curating positivity is really important right now.
Yes.
I think it will be the glue to hold us together as we move
I agree. And being kind to yourself, being thoughtful to others, being thoughtful to yourself. Because, I always say too, how when kids go to college, you feel like you were a rock star in high school and you played sports and you had the GPA, but you get to school and you're lost.
Yeah.
You don't know how to self-care and deal with the ups and downs.
That's right. And you're probably noticing that a lot of the kids, I wouldn't say it's not millennials, but it's like the next, what is it? Generation next, or they are experiencing more, trauma in their lives.
Absolutely. It's in the research. Their depression, anxiety.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is really prevalent now, especially ironically with the onset of social media, because we're able to see what everybody else is doing, and this sort of FOMO, fear of missing out, and this aspirational culture has changed to feeling like you're not enough.
Right.
And that really is impacted by the media. I really believe that.
Yes. And they are in the midst of this mental health pandemic.
Yes.
I was just part of this fellowship. I mention this a lot on my show because mental health comes up a lot on my show. And, we looked at the research of what's going on in college kids, students of all ages, their mental health with their isolation, their anxiety, they're missing out on these life moments. And then older adults who've been pushed to the side for safety, right? And they're isolated and depressed and lonely. But actually, Melissa, when you bring these two generations together, magic happens.
Yeah. And it's such an important time for self-care and self-reflection.
Right.
And yet the isolation is doing the opposite of that.
It sure is.
More anxiety and more FOMO and more destructive tendencies.
You bet. And
it's really sad because on the one hand, our job is to survive this moment. And especially as artists, to survive and be able to tell the story. And I'm really excited about, even though it's such a challenge, like what is the art that's going to be created after this moment of intense self-reflection and trauma at the same time? It will be a new age of enlightenment, I think, but we have to, at the same time, find a way to be positive and kind and care for each other.
Yes. But you touched on something really important: art, creativity, curiosity, love of learning, things like that.
Yeah.
I feel like those are the tools to get you going or out of your own way when things do get challenging. And I think your film will inspire a lot of young minds to do just that. I really do.
That's exactly what we'd hoped. And this idea of inspirational and educational, you don't see that a lot, especially in the films that are coming out now. And it's permission. We give you permission to be happy and to have joy. And I think for Black people, especially people of color, it's really tricky right now because there is so much trauma and we are impacted by it constantly, but we are not the sum total. Trauma is not the sum total of us,
That's right.
Historically, yes. And genetic PTSD, certainly since the days of enslavement, but we can recognize that. And we can also have permission to find joy in our lives and find joy and strength.
Yes,
we do. And there's a line from the film that's James Baldwin. And when, they're having that heart to heart with Nikki Giovanni, and she's trying to say, but, we're, as Black writers, what is our role and how do we survive? And he says, our ancestors taught us how to do that. We have survived until now.
Yeah.
And it's just, it just makes the hair
stand
up on my arms. He was so prophetic and so profound, and at the same time, eviscerating the culture and in ways demanding us to look at ourselves in ways that we really weren't ready. I'm so happy that James Baldwin is having a renaissance and that all of these artists can be seen, this idea of the politics of visibility and what that means for us now. It's all part of a piece, I think. And so I think the timing is perfect for Mr. Soul, because we need Ellis Haizlip to kind of restore the soul of a nation in just showing what he was battling 50 years ago.
Yes.
And everything feels cyclical, doesn't it?
I think so.
So I really wonder what's going to happen 50 years from now. But I'm so happy to be in this moment and trying to illuminate his work. And in that way, it feels like soul is the tide that lifts all boats. And
yes.
And we wanted the film to be inclusive. Like, it's not just a Black film, but it's really, it's a story of us. It's a story of our nation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. And we're so excited to be on HBO Max.
It's amazing. I want to tell you, I put everything up on our show blog. That I think I have the trailer on there as well. Where can people find out more about you and about the film?
Sure. Yeah, so we have a website. It's www.mrsoulmovie.com. And we're also heavy on the socials. We're on the Instagram at Mr. Soul the Movie. Okay. Also the same on Twitter and Facebook. And so it's at MRSOUL the movie. And those are my thumbs. So you can hit me up directly. I really am running all of the accounts. And it's just a real mom and pop's operation. But it's a much bigger story. But there's so much humanity and heart in it. And so we've, managed to keep it small but now that it's nationwide, it just feels great that at last the nation is getting.
It's amazing. I bet when you started this journey, you had no idea you were going to get to those 100+ hours, of episodes, and then how you would feel at the end.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had a lot of trepidation in the beginning because I felt like this story deserves to be a series, like sort of like an eyes on the prize thing.
I think so.
And I also was nervous because I thought this story is way bigger than me because there's so many stakeholders in it. And I also recognize that many of our African-American icons of the 20th century would be leaving us.
Yes.
And how can we give them their flowers before they go? And how can we have them tell their own stories before they go?
Sure.
That was the daunting part. Like, I don't know if I can handle it. But
you did.
We did. We had a great team, and it's a shout out to the team because it really takes a nation to make a documentary, but to also make it fairly and appropriately and accurately and historically. So you find all those people that are specialists in their field and can embrace the story and guide us. So it's not just my journey. It's a big team. Yeah.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be able to talk about it. And now it's on HBO Max, so everybody can enjoy.
Well, at some point when I come back east, I'd love to meet you.
Yes, please. Let's go back to Syracuse.
I'd love that. Melissa, thank you so much for calling into the show. I really enjoyed meeting you, and the film was outstanding.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and I really appreciate it. And great to meet you, Janeane.
You too.